Hello, and welcome back to Vox Popcast, the weekly pseudo-academic roundtable of pop culture analysis with drinking and swearing. My name is Christopher Maverick, but you can call me Mav, and I am once again here with my co-hosts, Katya and Wayne. How's it going, guys?
Hey, Mav.
Hey. Oh, I have no snappy patter prepared. I don't know. Like, I don't.
We're gonna have to jump right into the topic.
No. I mean, that's
ridiculous.
Why would we actually be efficient and on task? That's not how.
And then we'd have to remember what the topic was, which is kind of my brief attempt to segue.
Memories are hard.
Yeah, memories are hard.
Oh, see, there you go.
Yeah, see, that's what I was. Yeah, totally set that up. Oh,
yep. Mm-hmm.
I was gonna reference something from last show, but full disclosure, we taped these out of order, so I'm not sure what last show was. So it might not be there.
Time is illusion.
Podcast time traveled.
Pod time doubly so.
I think last week we talked about the Winter Soldier Falcon finale, which wasn't that great?
Yeah, awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I think assuming that's what we talked about last week, and that it was great because it totally doesn't air next week for us as we record this. But that said, what were we talking about? See, again, I forgot. That's my
yeah,
I'm doing a bit, guys.
You're doing a bit. Okay.
Okay. We're talking about memory today. This is your topic, Wayne.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I'm essentially going to repeat the anecdote from the blog. I just memory is something that's been on my mind a lot of late. I have a really pretty good memory. People tell me that, and I think it's true. A lot of it is very visual.
As far as you
memory.
can remember.
Yeah, as far as I know, people tell me that all the time. So I was getting ready to go to work one morning. I pulled a CD off my CD rack to play in the car. Because yes, I still play CDs in the car sometimes. And
just use an 8-track.
Yeah. and kind of at random, I listen to so much music, and I do get tired of listening to some of as much as I have, I get tired of listening to some of the same things over and over. And I grabbed something I knew I hadn't listened to in a long time. Brian Ferry, who was the lead singer of Roxy Music back in the 70s, has done tons of solo stuff. It's an album of his from the mid-90s called Mamona, which I'm probably pronouncing incorrectly. Probably haven't listened to it since the mid-90s, quite honestly. And I put it on, and my experience of listening to the album was, yep, this is a Brian Ferry album, but nothing stood out to me in terms of song. What did hit me as I saw this, though, was I remembered exactly where I bought this and the circumstances around it. Small flea market in the middle of nowhere, down in a holler in West Virginia, and guys selling a table full of miscellaneous stuff, including CDs. And I remember thinking when I saw it there, who in this holler in West Virginia has ever heard of Brian Ferry and listens to it? And maybe they listened to it once and just decided to sell it. But,
or they got 12 CDs for a penny.
Yeah, right. But for $3, all right, I like Brian Ferry well enough to buy this. But the thing is, seeing the actual physical CD brought back this specific memory of seeing it at this flea market, being at that flea market. It's a place I went with my mom and dad different times, but there were incidents at that specific time. I know that's the exact same day that I ran into a college music professor of mine, James Randolph, who everybody affectionately called Fuzzy. That's how he wanted to be known.
Interesting.
Fuzzy was one of the most wonderfully eccentric, brilliant human beings I've ever met. Just universally loved, and unfortunately passed about 5 years ago. I remember having a conversation with him that day about music. So it ties together with buying the CD, but it also more generally brought back memories of that specific flea market, being there with my mom and dad, going to other flea markets with them. But my point of this was it was tied to that object. So the idea of memories being tied to the idea of a memento. We go on vacation, we buy a snow globe with a Niagara Falls in it to remind ourselves that, once I saw billions of tons of water falling over a cliff. Because, without that snow globe, I would have no memory of that. And obviously, that's not true. But it's the idea of encoding memories in objects. So that got me to wondering, as we go more and more digital, are we encoding memories the same way? If we don't have that physical object, if I'm just downloading MP3s, I'm not going to have the memory of, I was sitting on my couch with my laptop, because that's 98% of my life at this point. Mm-hmm. How are we encoding memories different? Are we losing something with that? Are we just So I don't know. I think it's a topic to talk about, just the idea of memory and how we do this and whatever.
That's a good sciencey question. So, in order to answer that, I thought I'd welcome back our chief psychology correspondent. I pulled some strings and I was able to get Dr. Stephanie Siler to, world-renowned psychologist.
Welcome back, Dr. Siler.
Thank you.
For our listeners who have not heard her before, Stephanie is literally a psychologist that deals in cognition and memory and learning. And
yes, mostly learning.
Yeah.
Not so much memory, but I have talked about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as
teaching.
a reminder, I have degrees in psychology, so I'm not completely oblivious to this entire concept either.
And also, for listeners who don't know, Stephanie is also my wife, so
Yes.
there was bribery involved.
No, not really. The bribery was, do you want to? No. He just asked me. I'm like, okay, I should probably brush up on my knowledge of memory anyway. So.
Do you not remember how memory works?
Memory is hard, like somebody said.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Steph.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah. So, is there a specific question you wanted me to address in this, or?
Yeah. I guess to start, can you talk a little bit about how memory actually works on a mechanical level? I know Mav gave an overview in the blog, but how do we what exactly is a memory? Psychologically speaking.
Oh, okay. Well, Mav actually described it pretty well, I thought, in Facebook. So memories are really just associations between neurons in the brain. So when you have just very basic idea, you have two stimuli presented at the same time. Your brain, through your visual sensory organs, processes these two stimuli, and your brain associates them just by the sheer fact that these neurons are activated at the same time. The brain forms connections between these neurons. It's a cluster of neurons, really, to form associations between that. So in the example that Wayne brought up, the association would be between the CD disc and his memory of what happened that day at I guess it was some kind of
flea market.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So and again, my vast knowledge of psychology that comes from literally just kind of being in the room with her sometimes when her and her smart friends are talking. Memories, when you're talking about these connections between neurons, just because I think our listeners need to know, memories are physical connections in your brain. There are, when you experience something, your brain, whatever you experience, your brain literally, and I simplified it. I said pathways, but I mean, almost like literal physical paths, the meat of the brain changes every time you experience a new thing.
Yes. The neurons themselves can change. You might have to edit this, but my memory of how neurons work is they have, there's synapses, which is spaces between the neurons. Dendrites communicate with axons of subsequent neurons through these pathways through which neurotransmitters communicate between them. But what can happen when you're forming a memory and association is you can have more dendrites form between certain neurons and the next neuron, so that it strengthens that pathway. So that's a physical way that a memory is strengthened.
And I've also read there's sort of that, every time we remember something, we're kind of rewriting the file. Our memories become the stories we tell ourselves. So that whole, what I'm remembering, as accurate as it feels to me, is actually the culmination of every time I've remembered this in my life.
Mm-hmm. So it changes as you remember it. So
it changes over time. So, however accurate I believe I am, there are things I'm getting wrong just because I've told the story over time. Mm-hmm. I've enhanced pieces of it. I've done it to make myself look better, and that's why, everybody has different memories of the same event. Not only are we seeing it through different eyes and processing it through different experiences, whatever, we also tell a different story to ourselves. So if you tell the same story over and over, it might not change very much at all, but over time, there's definitely some changes, and it's literally rewriting the files.
Right. Your brain's playing telephone, right? My understanding is every time, the more you remember something, the less accurate it actually can become.
Yeah. So sure, every time you remember something, you also have you might have been thinking about one thing when you remember the specific memory. And because due to the fact that certain neurons are firing at the same time, then the thoughts that you're currently thinking that have nothing to do with the initial experience become associated with that former memory. And so you form this new sort of memory.
So as a concrete example of that, I will now associate doing this podcast with that Brian Ferry CD.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right. So if Wayne's talking about physical objects, then if he's talking about his physical CD or the snow globe or the I went all the way to Cancun and all I got was this lousy t-shirt or whatever, right? Like any of those things, those physical items, it's not just that you're seeing the physical item and it says Cancun on it or it's a picture of the Niagara Falls. It is because it occupies the same memory space, literal memory space, because of the association. So you are like, so that would mean even, that would mean when I look at my Cancun t-shirt or my my Niagara Falls snow globe, I close my eyes and I go, oh yeah, I remember. And I just like feel the lovely happiness of being at Niagara Falls or whatever. Right. Like that's how it works.
And photographs do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like we take pictures. Well, in the past, when we had to be careful about how many pictures we took pictures of things that we wanted to remember, people, places, that sort of thing. Now we take pictures of everything because we can.
Right. Well, that was going to be my next question, because like so Wayne's post was about, are we losing this by moving to the digital age? And, we'll get back to music in a little bit,
mm-hmm.
music and movies and stuff like that. But I was thinking about, I've as we sit in the room that doubles as my podcast studio and photography studio, I love photography. I take a lot of pictures. And like Wayne just said, photography is not limited by film anymore, right? Like it's not like I have 36 shots that I have to choose carefully and then I have to change film. I can take out, if I don't care about using my nice expensive camera, I can take out my phone and I can just record everything that ever happens to me. Like, how many people do you know that just like literally post pictures of their dinner every day on Instagram, mm-hmm. right? Like that is a thing that people do. So so originally I was thinking, well, in the digital age, we don't have these photos. Nobody has a photo album anymore. And I don't just like look through and, let me page through old photos. Steph was looking at a photo album that my mom gave me of when I was a kid earlier today. And mm-hmm. she's like, oh yeah, that was me as a kid. Now I don't do that. Now I just like click, and I post to Facebook or Instagram or So is it the same thing?
I think it can be. If you look back through, if I look through my digital pictures, like say the memories on Facebook thing, things will come up that I hadn't thought about. And the picture will certainly prompt a memory. But I do think part of what's missing there, it's the same way with whether it's a CD or a book or whatever, going through an old photo album, photos, actual physical photos that I've had my entire life, the tactile experience of going through them is a piece of that as well. Mm-hmm. So it's much like we've talked about reading digitally as opposed to reading mm-hmm. a book. There's this other tactile thing that comes into play in the way you experience it and process the information.
But much like reading, though, is that a product of the way that certain people are habituated to dealing with information, or is there an actual difference in how you perceive a digital object, physical object? Because I could like kind of what you're describing about going through albums, I do all the time with my Instagram. So I might take more pictures mm-hmm. of things than I think I would agree with that, than I would with say, a film camera. But I also curate them fairly intentionally. And I often, mm-hmm. especially if I'm having a bad day or whatever, like there are things I will go through my Instagram feed, or like especially I have a few albums on my phone that are like pictures from like nice memories that I keep on my phone. So and to me, they like perform a very similar function. So I don't know mm-hmm. if it's really like, I guess my question is like, is the tactile experience actually necessary for the memory process?
No, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's like so many things when we talk about this, it's changing. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's necessary, but it is a changing phenomenon. I guess I'm curious about that.
Well, it's a comfort thing, right? Like Wayne is an old man who is trained to view photos in a certain way. I mean, I don't mean that even as an insult. I mean, it's a joke, but like it's the, we've talked about this before, like you said, on our reading episode, we mm-hmm. talked about the reason, and I've gotten better at it because just in the act of being a grad student, doing a dissertation and just needing thousands of books, like it just became much more. It's a much easier thing to do on an iPad than it is if I had to carry around literally 500, books everywhere I go. They're heavy.
In the era of COVID, with libraries being closed for the last year, I've done more digital reading in the last year than the rest of my life all put together.
Right. But it feels different because I'm not used to it. And when we first started talking about the show, I was thinking about like photo albums, and it's like, oh, I don't really do that anymore. Like I've got this photo album, the one that the Steph, you were looking through a photo album that my mom gave me. I think it's from like when I went away to college. So they're pictures of me as a little kid, right? They're
a little baby,
baby,
less than a year. Yeah, he still has the same hairline. It's so adorable.
Which we'll link to in the show notes.
So not showing up in the show notes, not on the YouTube video.
Showing up in the show notes.
No, I don't know if I want to see the picture, because I'm just imagining like an adult Mav that has been shrunk with like a little shrink ray.
Yeah.
That is pretty much what I look like.
And made into sepia.
Yeah. Well, yeah. When I am also old. Color had not yet been invented when I was a child. So, but yeah, there was a point in my life where I might, do exactly that. And it's like, oh, I want to feel close to home. I'll grab out the photo album and I'll look through. It's a thing people do, right? Like, people have kids who turn 14, 15, bring their first boyfriend or girlfriend home, and then the parents just want to embarrass them by showing the photos that are not going to show up on our show notes to them. So those things happen. And I was thinking, well, we don't really do that anymore, except that we do, because literally every morning Facebook says, do you remember this from 7 years ago? Instagram says, I get these memories that show up, and people, or like friends of mine will tag me in an Instagram story, right? Like, hey, this is, remember like 18 years ago before COVID started, when we all used to be able to go outside and go to places. And here's a picture of the last time I did that 18 years ago, last March,
I mean, I think that raises an interesting question, though, because we're talking about Instagram and Facebook have become like part of, and other platforms obviously have become part of the way that we like experience these photos again. Like, is maybe one of the differences also just like that memory is being commodified in a way that it wasn't before? Because like the difference is also like your family photo album doesn't have ads.
Right.
Like, it's also like, I mean, also technically, like on most social media platforms, those media platforms assert some level of rights to your content.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whereas your baby picture, Mav, is not owned, like Mark Zuckerberg cannot claim any form of ownership on that picture unless you posted it to Facebook. Yes,
but I also don't just look at it I use that as my example, but my watch face for on my Apple Watch is the Siri app. So it routinely just shows me pictures from my photos memories, which are things in my iPhoto collection, which are not necessarily.
Yeah, my iPhone does the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. They're not necessarily posted to, they literally exist only on my computer and my watch and my phone. So, there's no ads, there's no anything. It's just like, oh, yeah, look, there's me. Like every once in a while I look down and, well, there's me and Steph at, on vacation in North Carolina. That was neat.
Yeah. So a couple points that I wanted to make, like the difference between like a physical, Wayne, you called them tchotchkes. I'm not going to use that word because like it reminds me of Scott Baio, but like mementos and whatnot, and having a picture of that. So one difference is just that you can, like you were talking about the tactile nature. You can like pick it up and hold it and everything. So that just is an additional like sensory pathway that you can associate with that memory. So in theory, it should be a stronger memory for that reason. I mean, if you're taking a picture, you are pressing a button, but it's not quite the same, I don't think, as like picking something up and holding it for a while and looking at it and all that, and associating that with your surroundings, I guess, at the same time. So that was one thing. And I guess another thing is like when you look at pictures, say on Facebook, you're probably just sort of scrolling through Facebook, right? And you're thinking about other things and you come across a picture and you're like, oh, okay. So it's kind of like, I guess, kind of not as like a pure like stimuli for your memory, because at the time you have I think you're probably thinking about other things too. I mean, it could be, I guess, but it just seems like more of a pure like way to elicit memories, having a physical item that's completely like decontextualized from everything else.
If you go to a photo album, if you have a photo album at home, physical photo album, and you go to it, you're actively saying, "I wish to remember these things."
Mm-hmm. There's intentionality about it.
Yeah. Whereas with Facebook, you're right. A lot of times stuff just pops up in today's memories. I mean, I have albums saved on there of different events.
Right, and you might go to those, but like there's random access to it. Yeah,
right. Yeah, right.
It's much more like you just noticed the CD. I mean, you were going to get a CD, but it's not like you didn't think to yourself, I would like to listen to some Brian Ferry today. You thought to yourself, I need an album, and you reached out, and that was the one that was at arm height. Yeah,
pretty much. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, but I have the same stuff with. Like there are books on my shelves here that I know I will never read again, but I can't Marie Kondo them because they serve as memory triggers. They're
books. You're not supposed to read
they're books. But there's a line in the movie High Fidelity where they're talking about how he organizes his music
biographically.
Autobiographically. And it's not alphabetically. It's not by artist. It's autobiographically. I have it organized in the order of my life.
Mm-hmm. And he's like, if I want to listen to something, I have to think about where I was the first time I heard that album.
And I understand that.
That's actually, I forgot about that quote. That's actually really interesting. It's actually one of my favorite things about Spotify.
Yeah.
Is it's in the order, like your liked songs is in the order in which you like them.
Mm-hmm.
So like I actually really love going through, like there are like I can identify, it's like going back like through like the time of Katya's life since I started Spotify.
Yeah.
Like I can see like, oh, that was that period of my life when I was going through this thing. So I was listening to a lot of music about this, or like I remember like this was that breakup album I listened to a lot when that was like, in my early 20s when this was happening. And like in some ways, I wish I had that for like my entire music listening life. Because it's really fascinating to go back and look at like all these different periods. And I go back and like, I think, in a strange way, I think because there's that chronological ordering, because like most of this music I listen to at different points all the time. But for some reason, like having that chronological ordering that I don't, which I would have never done independently.
Yeah. I don't have my music organized like that on my shelves, but it's certainly organized that way in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And once again, there's the visuals. I talk about the physical CD, and the music on the album was really kind of like, I just really didn't ring a bell very much at all. But I mean, there are certainly albums I've listened to a million times, but I can also associate specifically where I was when I became a fan of this. There are albums that are specific people and places in my life. And when I hear the music, no matter how many times I listen to it, it triggers some of those memories as well.
And I think that's one of the things that I find valuable about a lot of like the digital ways of archiving this stuff. I mean, part of it is also like I'm a bit younger than both Mav and Wayne, and so like I think Steph is ageless. She will continue forever.
Yes.
But I wonder if I experience some of this stuff differently because maybe like it feels I'm not quite a digital native in the sense of like I grew up with the internet, but not like the internet as we know it now.
Right.
Makes sense. Social media was very much like
you've heard me say that visual memory kind of thing that I do. My visual memory is really good. I'm very much a visual thinker.
Same.
Which is a segue to possibly another topic that I want to introduce. It may be a completely different show, but we'll get there. How many times have I told you, Mav, you're working at the comic shop? Like I had comics as a kid. I was a little kid in the 60s and a slightly less little kid in the 70s, and a teenager in the late 70s, early 80s. But, people would bring in boxes of old comics to try to sell to us. And, I'd be 2 or 3 books in, the old stuff, and be like, I had that. Oh, I had that. I never remember that. Because I don't have all the comics from my childhood. But I see a cover. I know exactly. I had that. Without a doubt. So it's a different, it's a different copy of the book than the one I own, but it's still a physical object. And the image triggers that memory of, oh, I owned that. And in some cases, even more specific memories that I hadn't thought of years.
Now and this is where I want to start asking Steph some questions, because we're starting to get into the way we associate memory with media. And it's just like, I know Steph's laughed at me for when we go out or, in the before time when we used to be able to go out and play bar trivia, like there's this thing I do, and it's not intentional, but like if somebody asks a question and I'm trying to figure it out, I look like Queen's Gambit. I look up, I look up because I have to visualize the answer inside my brain.
And this ties into ties into the topic I just referenced. So go ahead.
Exactly. So like if and it's an obvious thing. If somebody asks me a question about a movie, right? Like if someone asks me, this is the literal question that we had at in bar trivia. It was like, who is the narrator in the Royal Tannenbaums? And the way that I do that is I sort of close my eyes and I read the credits to the Royal Tannenbaums on the movie screen in my head.
See, that would be sort of like hypnosis, like we were talking about before. You're very concentrated on that specific thing.
Right. But the only way I can do that is like I have to do that association. I have to visualize the movie because the answer is Alec Baldwin, and he doesn't appear in the movie. I just have to I have to close my eyes. I have to play the movie in my head, listen to it, and I can see it right now with my eyes closed. And then I can read the credits and the credits and Alec Baldwin as the narrator. Gotcha. Okay, so that's the answer. But sometimes there will be weird, and I can't even explain it. There are weird connections where it will not be a movie question, right? It'll be a history question. It will be, and I still have to do the same thing because I have to go in my head and replay the comic book connected to the movie, connected to the song that's connected to the memory of me learning that in high school in order to get there. And like, it's an unconscious but physical action that I have to do in order to get there. And that's just, I can't explain it any better than that random way I just did it. But that's how I'm remembering stuff.
And I've had a couple conversations recently on a couple different Facebook threads about just exactly that, how we think. Someone posted in the Old Guys Who Love Old Comics group recently that they don't have good visualization skills, and they never thought about it. If you ask them, they can't imagine they don't know what you mean when you say picture Superman in your brain. They can't form an actual picture in their brain. And I actually can't comprehend what thinking is if you can't do that.
Me either. And
I've had this conversation with different people who that idea of being able to visualize something fully is something they can't do. And like, if you say, what's an apple look like? In my brain, I
see it right now.
Yeah, I can see it. And I can kind of feel the tactile nature of it and maybe taste it a little bit. And if there's a difference between a Granny Smith and a Red Delicious, and like it's there. It's a very almost physical object that I can conjure in my mind's eye, to use that phrase. And people talking how they just simply can't imagine what that is. They can't process that mode of thinking. And it never crossed my mind until the last 10 years that everybody didn't think like that. Just like they didn't think, they'd hear the phrase mind's eye, but it didn't mean anything. So I'm wondering how, memories with that, like if you can't visualize something, how does memory work if you're not visualizing it? And that's something I just truly don't understand. I believe it happens.
Yeah. So just to address what Mav was saying, and you're like, to me, the way that you retrieve a memory is like, as you described there, was very different from how and I guess maybe, I don't know you guys, the rest of the people on the panel, but to me, like, I've never heard anyone describe it like you. Like for most people, it's just like a very quick associative process where you're like, someone asks you to, I guess you're using like almost a strategy, like
not intentionally, but just
it's weird because it's so it's like deliberate and methodical, and that's not really how we think of how memories work in general. That's almost like you're using like your working memory, your prefrontal cortex to solve like logic problems and things like that. It's almost very logical. So that's a weird, unusual way. So, at least maybe you're describing it differently from how it actually happens.
I have no idea how it actually works.
And there are huge intuitive leaps there. There are times I don't know how I got to that thing. Another, and this is an anecdote from the store that involves Mav and our friend Jamil, and this is probably 20 years ago. We were talking about a similar topic, and we're talking about superheroes and superhero costumes. And I made the claim, just my visual memory is give me a superhero who has appeared Marvel and DC and give me something to draw, and I'll recreate their costume for you with about 90% accuracy.
Okay, that's interesting. So this is kind of related. Okay, go ahead, finish.
And Jamil played that out. He asked me a couple and I did it. And then Mav, because Mav is a smartass, gave me the Wasp, who has had a different costume in every appearance she's ever been in.
Sorry.
And I promptly drew 3 of them.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you're like, so there's this idea in education. I'm not sure if it originated in, I don't think it originated in, I think it originated in Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, where people have, like you said, visual intelligence, verbal intelligence, sports, like just bodily, like motion intelligence, all that stuff. Yeah. So like the idea came from that theory that teachers should be teaching students according to where their particular skills are. So a lot of people seem to think that they're like visual learners. I think that's predominantly what I hear, at least when I hear people talk about the kind of learners they are.
When people say it, yeah, but I don't know. People say it,
yeah. So the interesting thing is when you there have been studies done where they have assigned a specific style of learning based on what people claimed their strength was. So for visual learners, they would give them text with lots of pictures. If people said they were verbal learners, then they would give them more like text-based information, etc. And so they did that, and they actually did not find that people learn more when you tailored the instruction to what they claimed is their strength. But like I think the reason for that is actually because people aren't so good at assessing their relative strengths. Like people just generally, but from what you've said, Wayne, I think you pretty convincingly are a visual learner.
There was a time, and if you look through any of my old college or grad school notebooks, some of which are probably still in a box somewhere in my life, you'll see that I have far more doodles and drawings on the page than I do actual notes.
Yeah.
But I also remember being able to look at those doodles and drawings, and at the time remember exactly what we were talking about in class that day.
Yeah,
it was encoded in my doodles.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I cannot read my own handwriting. I have the worst handwriting on the planet. My notes happen in 2 ways. If I need to actually write down what you say, then I type it in Evernote on an iPad or laptop. And before iPads and laptops existed to where for school, I sat there with notebooks and like I would just listen and draw the person next to me. Right. So like right now I can, this is weird, but like I can visualize our friend Max, who does our theme song. And I can visualize a drawing I've done of Max and remember, what we were learning in a creative writing class 30 years ago. Yeah. Or 25 years ago, or whatever it was. I can visualize my friend Cameron and having drawn her and remember the conversation with that, because that's how I encode them. I mean, and it's, so when Steph said, is it like solving a logic problem? Yes, when I do it intentionally, but usually it's like if I'm trying to answer a trivia question where I have to dig, then I have to like sort of go through the filing cabinet in my head that way, and it's slower. But just in general, if you say something in general like that, those things fire. And I can't always describe to you the process, but I can tell you that I see a flash.
But it's taking time. The fact that like I can see when we're at trivia, I can see it's taking time, and you're like, don't talk to me, stay away. While you're trying to think, then that leads me to believe that you're doing something kind of different from how most people, it's either like boom, it's there, or I have no idea.
Well, and sometimes boom, it is there, but like if it's not boom, it's there. I have to do it. I don't know how. I don't know. I'm going to say manually. There's no manual aspect. It's just me thinking. But like it is really it feels like a manual process.
Well, there's that classic image of the conspiracy theorist with the red threads tied between pins. I'm following those red threads.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And I was just going to show just for because I expect this is going to work for Wayne, and I don't know if I know it won't work for Steph. It might or might not work for Katya. But like so I just posted an image in the chat. I'm going to show Steph because I know she's not going to see it. Now, if it's a picture of Batman. It's a picture of Batman from a random really bad comic called Batman, All-Star Batman and Robin. But it doesn't matter what the comic is. It's just Batman talking. And if I read that picture, Wayne, what voice do you hear? I hear Kevin Conroy. Whenever I read a picture of Batman, Kevin Conroy, I hear Kevin. Yeah, Kevin Conroy is the voice of Batman, and when I say that, I mean it's not like I did it intentionally. I just grabbed a picture of Batman because I knew that's what it would be. But I can looking at that picture reminds me of Kevin Conroy's voice, and I know exactly what he sounds like, even though that's not.
Can I ask why it reminds you of that?
Because
voice?
Kevin Conroy is the voice of Batman. He just is, and there
have been a million other voices of Batman.
Yeah, I've never heard of this guy. So
he's the voice of Batman and Batman the Animated Series.
Oh,
and why? And can I explain why Kevin Conroy is the voice of Batman rather than Michael Keaton or Adam West or Christian Bale? No, he just is. And when I see a picture of Batman, now if I see a picture of Christian Bale playing Batman, then I hear Christian Bale's voice in my head. But if I just see any random picture of Batman, whether Jim Lee drew it like this one, or Paul Dini or Wayne or I, right? If I draw a random picture of Batman, sounds like Kevin Conroy to me. That's just and I cannot forget his voice because that's how I associate it. So
what year was that? Like the first experience you had?
No, Kevin Conroy didn't start doing Batman till I was either
1990, 91.
Yeah, so I was near an adult. He's just the voice of Batman. The association is so close in my head to that's how it is, and I don't know. I'm not doing anything to make it happen. It's just what I hear, and I also I hear voices when I read. I don't read silently in my head, even though I read faster than I can actually talk. I hear. And I don't know. And other people said they don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have pictures when I read.
Oh yeah, me too.
Pictures and voices.
Yeah.
I have a weird when you say that out loud.
Yeah, I have a friend who reads constantly and swears she doesn't sub-vocalize when she's reading, and I don't know what reading is if you're not doing that.
Me too. Yeah.
To me, reading is watching, especially if it depends. If I'm reading fiction is in watching a movie in my head.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Well, and that was one of the things this guy in this Old Guys Who Love Old Comics group said. He thinks comics have appealed to him because that gives him the visuals. He says, he has a tough time reading fiction because he can't picture what's going on. He can read nonfiction and facts and that sort of thing, and he's fine. But descriptive passages in fiction, they're just words. He can follow the plot and whatever, but he doesn't see things. And he says he finds himself skipping large passages that are descriptive.
Yeah, I do want to go back to kind of the example Mav, to the Batman example, because and this is a question maybe for Steph. Is there a difference though between memory and association, or is is memory a form of association? Because what Mav's describing to me, I don't know if I would call that as a memory.
Yeah, because Kevin Conroy never read that panel,
right? Yeah,
so I don't remember it. But I do. It feels like I remember it.
Right. So you generally think of Kevin Conroy's voice for Batman. So when you see a Batman picture, especially in comic format, because you've seen that compared to the number of hours that you've watched movies of Batman with different actors playing it, I would assume that is less than the number of hours that you spent listening to this guy.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
wait. You're
I'm just wondering in terms of time spent.
We've heard Conroy's voice as Batman more than any other single voice as Batman.
Yeah.
Yes, by now, because he's done it. He's still the voice of Batman, and he's been the voice of the Batman cartoon for 30 years.
Right.
With some exceptions in different movies.
Yeah, but on and off for 30 years. But
in general, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I guess that's a really interesting question, Katya, that you ask. Is memory different from association? So I guess memory would be association plus the ability to trigger that association. Mm-hmm. So in the case of Mav with the voice of this guy playing Batman, he has a very strong association just based on number of hours spent associating the visuals with the voice.
Yeah, I'm really wondering. I mean, have I heard? I mean, he certainly performed it more than anybody else, but I don't know. But it's entirely possible that for me personally, because I was an adult by the time he was doing it, or I was near an adult. I think I might have been 17 when he started. Right. Mm-hmm. Like
still relatively young.
Right. But I wasn't watching. It's not like I came home from school every day and watched the Batman show the way I did when I came home from school and watched the Adam West Batman show as a kid. Right. Like it's entirely possible that probably.
I forgot about that one.
Right. Well, but probably the most Batman that I've ever heard for me is probably either the 60s television show or the Super Friends show.
Yeah, but that's live action.
Or the Super Friends show, which I've heard.
And Adam West did voice for some of the cartoons over the years too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, I don't know why it's because that would be the voice of Batman during my.
Is it the style of the drawings that you associate? You think with
because it looks nothing like this.
Yeah.
Because Kevin Conroy's Batman looks like this stuff.
But for the Batman series, when you watched the animated version of Batman that Adam West was voicing for, did that remind you of the original? Maybe maybe not consciously, but I'm just wondering since the live action version came first, then he played the. Here we go. Okay, so this is that's
Conroy's Batman.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't really know the answer to that, but it could be just because you associate Adam West's voice with the live action like I do. I actually, when I was a kid, I actually did watch Batman and Robin, the live action version, but not later version. So I'm wondering maybe that's why you didn't associate Adam West later with the comic book version.
If I read a Batman novel, I hear Kevin Conroy's voice in my head. And the association's just there. It's just that Kevin Conroy is what I imagine Batman sounds like. Anybody else who, Ben Affleck is just doing a Ben Affleck. Is acting as Batman. Kevin Conroy is just how I hear Batman's voice in my head. And like oddly enough, I mean, it's other things like that happen too. And I wonder if it's just like the way the associations work in my head, because if I hear Kevin Conroy's voice, like on the radio, like on on an interview, on a podcast, I can see Batman. And in fact, to the point that like Kevin Conroy is a weird looking guy because he doesn't look like Batman's supposed to look when I see him in real life. I mean, he's a fine looking guy. He just doesn't look like Batman.
and he played an alternate universe Bruce Wayne in The Flash last year. So.
In The Flash and an Arrow, and which was fine.
Yeah.
But that's just, he doesn't look like Batman. He just sounds like Batman.
Like,
but you go ahead.
I was just going to ask, of the Batman voices, the various Batman voices, would you say he's kind of like the average?
No,
sort of an outlier. Okay.
No. I mean, it feels like I can't explain it any better than that. I wonder, but what I'm wondering is it just, and I don't know if you can even answer this like in an hour, much less like, 2 minutes, but like how different are the concept of thinking and memory? Because what made me think of this was when you guys were talking about, reading and stuff and the way the associations are built. Yeah. Like I hear voices when I read always. And I see pictures when I read always. And it goes the other way too. Cause I think Wayne, you're the one who told me that you can't listen to books on tape. You just
I have a tough time with it. Yeah. My auditory, and it's the same thing. Like one of the problems I had in purely lecture classes throughout my life is ongoing monologues turn into Charlie Brown adults to me. And a book on tape is like that. It's just want. My brain just zones out. I
have no problem with it.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think I'm a good auditory learner.
Yeah,
in spite of having a master's and doing,
right. Every comic strip every comic strip that I've ever drawn, which has been a bunch, like when I was working on the comic book, I would sit there and draw while listening to a book or a podcast or whatever, and I pick up everything.
So I think another thing that we haven't really brought up much is like the relationship between emotion and memory. So if you experience stronger emotions while you're experiencing something else, then those tend to form like stronger memories. Like people talk about, I know exactly where I was when this like traumatic event happened, like when the Challenger exploded, when JFK was shot, those kinds of things. So maybe that's also a factor in why you maybe for some reason like that version of Batman with this
and
guy.
That's just one example. I mean,
yeah. So I'm just wanted to bring that into discussion because that's and I just learned today actually looking at how the brain works.
States. There's an idea called state dependent learning, and the idea that you remember things better.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and it's and the example when I first heard of this was if you take a class while you're high, take the test while you're high.
Yeah.
Because the memory association will be there. So the state you're in. Yeah.
And I was just going to say that I just learned today that there are actually associations. I just thought it was timing, but there are actually like physical connections between the emotional centers of your brain, like the amygdala being like the primary emotional center of your brain, and the cortical, like areas of the cortex that actually like hold the memories. So any kind of like people are generally, if you haven't noticed, very emotional beings. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
Except for Mav, who's a android type thing. But yeah, so I'm just wondering if maybe like the Batman version that you associate with the voice, maybe it was just like more dramatic, or I don't know. Or maybe you're a teen, even being a teenager, like teenagers are even more emotional than like adults and younger people. So you said you started watching it when you were 17, so that could be another factor.
On some level, for me, that Batman animated series is sort of distillation of Batman to its like it to me it's kind of primal Batman more than anything else.
Yes.
Like if they stripped away everything except the essence of that character and all the characters in it, so it's one of my favorite Batmans because of that. Right. And maybe because it has
it is very much the idea of Batman. His voice is the idea of Batman.
I mean, what the panel you showed me was very emotional.
Right. But that panel is not from that series is what I'm talking about. I only like that is a much darker Batman. Drawn by Jim Lee, written by Frank Miller. That has nothing to do with that series. But because Kevin Conroy he embodies the idea of what Batman is in my brain, in the spot of my brain devoted to Batman. He's just it.
If you make a platonic ideal of Batman, an archetype that is Batman.
That is Batman.
That would be the voice
series.
of it. And everything else is a divergence from that.
Okay, so he's like the essence of Batman. Right. And that's okay, so that's interesting because that's like reminds me of like how people learn categories and how people like one theory is that there is like the center, the most likely to be remembered or recalled in a particular category is like the essential, like what people consider to be like the central part of so like birds like have most in common with like robins have most in common with other birds, and like so people essentialize Robin as bird, so maybe that's the essential version.
He is the essential Batman.
Okay, so that's maybe why you remember that more. That's also a factor.
And I guess that's why what I'm wondering is thinking, because I would consider that thinking, not memory, because again, he never said these words.
Right, it's related to memory though. It's related to what you're going to remember later. Yeah,
that's because I'm wondering. I mean, same thing. If I I probably I don't know. Like all zucchini bread I ever eat is in relation to how does it stack up against my grandmother's, right? Like that is the perfect zucchini bread.
The platonic ideal, what is a chair, and then everything else is a modification of that central idea.
Yeah. So
and we've probably gone way off the original topic. Well, but I think it all ties together. I mean, the idea of memory is very much tied into the way we think, the way we process.
Well, back to the original topic then, because I'm wondering, your initial question, Wayne, was, are we losing the ability to remember things by changing the way in which we experience things? And because when you wrote that blog, I sort of dove off of it and I started thinking about television shows. Like in the old days, I would be flipping through channels on TV and I'd be like, oh, it's an old Seinfeld, or you can go, oh, it's an old Hogan's Heroes. I want to watch this one. I remember this one, and I know exactly what I'm getting into when I watch it. Like I know what happened on this episode of MASH or Brady Bunch or Hogan's Heroes or The Cosby Show or whatever the fuck show I'm watching at 2 a.m. in syndication. And I would just sort of, I haven't seen this one in a while. Let me sit down and spend half an hour, enjoying this. And I don't really do that anymore because I live in a world with Netflix and, and there's just like now, like, I don't know how syndicated television works anymore because Like, why would I just ever watch a random episode of Friends from 20 years ago? If I wanted to, I could just watch, or like Steph recently watched all of The Office just because she was in the mood to.
It's such a good series.
Yeah. But I mean, but you'd seen it before. We watched it the first time, right? And Steph was just
not really.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought you had.
That was before I didn't watch
The Office?
I might have seen. The Office.
Yeah.
I was still thinking.
Yeah. But Steph recently watched all of The Office, and we'd seen it before because we watched it the first time.
I
But she was
think
just
Community,
like,
actually.
yeah. But she was like in a mood, and she was like, oh, I'll go and I'll watch the entire series run. And part of that is just sort of, I don't know, nostalgic, which is memory.
Mhm.
But like also it wasn't random. There was you took a dedicated move to just watch The Office again, right? It's not the same as it just happens to be on because I'm flipping through local television stations and this is what they air.
Yeah, that was one of the
syndication
first things that I watched during the pandemic because I was missing like being around people. And so I started watching shows like The Office and Community where there were a bunch of people hanging out together.
You're right.
Because I missed that.
This probably ties into the Patton Oswalt Edowoff thing, and I can't remember exactly what that stands for, but it's that idea that everything is available all the time, which is changing the way we interact with stuff. And his point was, and this had a certain old guy feel to it. Like back in my day, I had to search out this thing, and it was more meaningful to me because I had to put this effort into finding it. And now you just turn on your computer and there it is.
But is it more meaningful? I think he's wrong.
Of it, though,
Yeah.
And that's, and I said that, yeah. And you're right.
Because what he's describing is the effort to go, and even Matt, what you're describing is the effort to go seek out the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like in the pre-streaming days, it would have been harder to rewatch an entire series of television.
Right.
And also probably more expensive, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But like now, I think the challenge is as we're talking about this, I keep thinking about, in some ways, I feel like what we're talking about is our memory triggers used to be way more accidental. They were based on environmental factors.
Yeah.
Whereas now they have to be curated. You have to be intentional about the kinds of things, and you have more opportunities to be intentional, which I think is
that's
actually
interesting.
really cool. Because like I can go, like, to me, like the most meaningful movie is, for me personally, that I always go back to is like Miyazaki's Spirited Away, which also I was thinking about just because I originally watched that in the original Japanese like subbed version, and so now whenever I hear a dubbed version, it makes my skin crawl because it's just like not the right voices.
This is wrong.
Even though it's dubbed like as well as can be done.
Yeah, the Spirited Away is actually pretty good. It's just
it's
not
dubbed
the
well.
soundtrack.
It's just like it's not right. It's not correct.
Katya, I think you make a really interesting point again. But I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking that the way things are now kind of makes us less intentional than how we were before. Because if you have so when I was I was at a conference in France, and we actually, it was North France, I think. So we went to.
Yeah, you're a globe-trotting world traveler.
Okay.
We're all jealous.
That was a long time ago. I haven't been out of the country. I miss traveling. Anyway, so I went to a bar with like some grad students, and this guy was walking around selling these cute little bears with like rhinestone eyes.
Tchotchkes, yeah.
No, mementos. Thank you very much. And so my friend was like, "Oh, you should buy one of those. That way you'll have a memory of this experience." I'm like, "Oh, that's a good point. I should do that." Yes. And then so I did, and then I have it like sitting in I don't know if Mav even have noticed that. Did I tell you that's okay? So anyway, it's sitting like in the bedroom, and I've intentionally put it there because I like to be reminded of like the times that I've been to like interesting places. So because like the physical thing was like, to me, that was a very intentional act of putting it there to remind me. But I guess I see as like too much information because
I was thinking more specifically about media, because media is like basically now when you have access to all media all the time, essentially, you have to be intentional about deciding what you are and aren't going to watch. Which I think is a little bit different than like what you're describing, which is more about like how are you being intentional about preserving memories of your actual life? Because those are things you can't access all the time unless you make some kind of intention to like remember them or like commemorate them in some way.
Is the difference then? Because I wonder, the difference here is Steph was talking about an intentional creation of a totem, right?
Right.
I mean, you didn't create it; you bought it.
Right.
Still, like you literally made a dedicated move in the moment to say, I want to remember being in France without my husband or boyfriend or whatever I was at the time, and enjoying how great it is not having Mav here. So I'm getting this little bear.
And you're phrasing of that a totem, because that's exactly what totem objects are.
I mean, I'm teasing myself, but I mean, but seriously, you wanted to have a memento of how much fun you were having in the moment. So you.
And I mean, and that could have been like a CD instead. It doesn't have.
Yeah, it could have been anything. Right. Could have been anything. Right.
But a physical totem of the experience, as opposed to Katya's talking about the randomly accessing of a non-intentional tchotchke. Because like when you're talking about like going through and watching Netflix in order to watch Spirited Away or The Office or whatever you decide to pull up on streaming, there was no point in which you decided I am going to like Steph decided she wanted that bear to be indicative of her first friend.
But I did decide what I was going to put in my personal archive. If that makes sense. Because I think a lot of this.
Well, because what I'm saying,
because I had to say like Spirited Away. I had to go through the process of Spirited Away is a movie I am interested in. I've seen before. Yes. I now have to go find it. And even when I go through Netflix, I'm not going through and just like clicking the random things that Netflix picks for me unless like it happens to show me something I like. I'm deciding like, hey, I heard about this TV show or somebody recommended this to me. I think that's, and I mean, even, which maybe relates it a little bit, I think, to the idea of like the tchotchke is like, the commonality between those two things is some aspect of intention, either by limiting what you're accessing, i.e. by like...
I was talking about just sort of like going to Netflix and seeing what's all available rather than creating.
Well, I have a question for the group then, because I think Katya's describing something that's in between the two things, right? So like in Steph's case, she's like, I'm in France. I want to remember France. I am buying something, this little bear, and I know what she's talking about because it's in our room. She's got a little crystal, right? I guess it's glass.
I'm not sure. It's not glass. It's kind of like, I don't know what it is.
She has a little bear.
Weird bear. Cool.
With a little tiny bear ornament, as would I best describe it as, right? But it's a totem that she decided I want to associate with France. I picked this to be my France memory, right? As opposed to Katya did not pick for Spirited Away to be associated with being probably about 11 or 12, I would imagine. However old you were.
Sure.
Yeah. But like you saw that for the first time randomly and have a strong memory of it. Like, it's not like you said, I want this, like Steph wanted this totem to represent this moment in her life. You experienced something that represents a moment in your life. So like in Steph's case, the intentionality was buying it in the first place. In your case, the intentionality is in recalling it. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not like Steph doesn't very infrequently. I mean, and maybe I'm wrong. I've never seen Steph walk over to her dresser and pick up the little bear in order to remember France. She goes over her dresser and then sometimes, oh, it's my little bear, but the intentionality came when you created the memory stuff. Whereas the intentionality for Katya is coming on the recall. And I think that matters somehow. Like, I think there's something, and like music. So Wayne, in your case, to the beginning of this conversation, the fairy CD, I don't think you were looking to create a memory then. It's just that, I want to buy this CD because I'm out here with at a store.
Right.
I guess that's my question is like, I don't know if the analogy between like capturing personal memories and what we seek out when we're looking for media exactly tracks, because I don't think we watch... Like, I don't think there's an instance, I could be wrong, but like generally, like I can't think of it in my own life, and I struggle to think of an example of like I go to a specific media thing with the intention of this is now like with the intention of making it a memory trigger for a thing. If that makes sense.
And the for me, that going back to that music thing, the line in between is I go to a concert to hear the music. I buy the T-shirt to remember the concert.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I didn't buy CDs or records or comics in my life to specifically have this memory, but they become the triggers. They become the association. They become the association.
And I don't know that has changed because of digital, like because of like access to media and all that stuff. I think it's just again, it goes back to we might have to be more intentional to find those things because
I think a lot of people do though. I think a lot of people do buy CDs at concerts to do that. So,
well, what do you do
didn't go to the concert?
Oh yeah,
I guess that's what I'm saying is going to the concert and buying the CD to remember the concert are different things.
Yeah.
Right. You went to the concert to enjoy it, not to create.
But it's analogous to my situation. Went to the concert, enjoyed it, and bought that to remember.
So you didn't go to France You went to France to enjoy it and have the experience. You didn't go to France to make the memory, if that makes sense.
I don't know. I mean, well, in her case, she's talking about a trip she did for work. But I think that we do, though. I mean, not we, like, four of us, we as humans, like, humans go on vacation. Like, you go on a family vacation because
to make memories,
to make those memories. So, like, I
guess I don't see it that way. Like, I get memories as a thing. Like, I go for the experience because I want to enjoy myself. I get memories, which are like a great part of that just happened because I'm a human being experiencing.
Well, I can give a very specific example.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that. But I hear people say that we wanted to go to Disney World to create some great family memories, and
and mine was we live here in Pittsburgh. My mother lives in San Diego. I have one brother who lives in Mississippi. My other brother used to live in San Diego. Now he lives in Georgia. I think they moved to South Carolina. South Carolina. I don't even remember because they just recently moved. But about 4 years ago, my mom specifically, she specifically organized all of us going to on vacation in San Diego and trips that we could go on because she wants her grandchildren to have, when I grew up, I grew up in the same hometown as my uncles and aunts and all my cousins. And so I saw my family frequently, like my extended family frequently. My mom's grandchildren don't have that because they're so dispersed across the country. So she had us all show up because she specifically wanted them to have a memory of a family vacation. Like she was like, this is it was an artificially created. I want to make sure everybody has fun so that for the rest of their lives after, she's older, obviously she's a grandmother. She's not going to outlive her grandchildren. So, but she wants to, when she's dead and gone, she wants 50-year-old grandchildren to think back to that time that Grandma Len, had this vacation and took us to the zoo and Legoland and all the places we went. So I think I think there is an intentionality to vacation sometimes. And I mean, that's what Disney is for most people. Like a lot of people go to Disney World, it's a place for memories, right? Or even non-families. Like how many times do you see people, let's go on vacation to the Grand Canyon and that's where I'm going to propose marriage because I want this to be a memorable, like as though anybody ever forgets their proposal.
Right.
But like you want that
and some of that is
I guess to me that's just just for me personally, not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just that's an odd way to me to approach, like, I don't know, this feels like an odd way to approach like how you like the things you decide to do.
Well, I think another factor in memory, I believe, is the novel. Things I remember most from my childhood are not the day-to-day we had dinner, whatever. It's my memories, farther back I go. I think this is probably true in life, are things that stand out as different than the routine.
Sure.
And a proposal by itself is different than the routine. But if you couple that with being someplace you've never been before, that's spectacular, it strengthens those connections. It makes it a special occasion worth remembering as opposed to, and you're talking about the Instagram people, just taking pictures of their meal every night. Look, I had ham. Is that worth remembering? Right.
Is that part of the strong mental and emotional connection? You were talking about trauma. Well, okay. Yeah. So Steph knows this. My earliest memory is breaking my jaw when I was 2 years old. It's literally the first thing in my head is falling and smashing my face and mangling my jaw. Like right after I was. And I mean, it's not like I wasn't cognizant of life before then, but like I don't remember random conversations that I had the week before that. Like it's a week after my second birthday. I don't remember my second birthday. Not really. I do remember breaking my face. I mean, I broke my jaw, and it is a very visceral, real memory in my head that I am keenly aware of 44 years later. So is that just because that was, I mean, it hurt, right? Like I remember the pain. Is that just it's a stronger memory association because, whatever happened the day before that was, me eating a hamburger or whatever.
Right. Yes. You have stronger associations between those memories and like your emotional centers of your brain, your amygdala to strengthen that.
Mhm.
And I think same thing for your proposals in crazy places. Then you probably associate. I don't know if that's actually a good thing, actually, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like, do you really want someone that you associate with like this like really exciting event, and then you're disappointed later when that, that doesn't happen all the time?
And certainly that whole thing, you going back to the proposal thing, couples who go on vacation or do these wonderful things together, and then the relationship falls completely apart.
Mhm.
Does that change the context of the memories? Like, I had this really great time in Vegas with this person who eventually abused me.
Then you changed.
Yeah, right. Yeah, can you even remember those things as pleasant memories anymore, even though they were?
I think you can.
Does it
I
change
think
the context?
You changed is the way that they.
It's just acknowledging that like it is. I think it becomes a different memory. Like it's a different experience of reliving it because you have different context. I don't think
unless you find out that they're like some like murder or something, then what? Like, yeah.
Are we weird though? I mean, I agree with all of you guys.
You are definitely weird, Mav. But
no, well, then you are too, because I agree with you there that we can separate it out. But I hear a lot of people say stuff all the time like, I can't listen to that song anymore because it was playing the first time I kissed my ex-boyfriend or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, really? You're going to let him ruin that for you? Fuck him. I can't, that doesn't happen for me.
I do wonder how much that's a choice. Because I think for a long time I thought like, well, maybe it's like amicable words, breakups. It's like easier. And actually I've had some like pretty upsetting relationships and like breakups and stuff like that. And actually weirdly, some of the like media and stuff from that, like it doesn't bother me. Because I think it does like I'm not saying it's a choice in the sense of like if you had if you actually experienced trauma, you could just choose to be like, no, I just really like this TV show still. But like I think there is a level of like you get to decide of like I don't know. I wonder if there's a way you can actively decide to disassociate something from somebody, if that makes sense. Like you could choose to like offer a new interpretation to your memory based off of context, like in a proactive way. I don't know if that actually makes sense with like the actual science of how memory works.
Yeah, no, I specifically I went to wow, my mind just went blank trying to tell the story. I was seeing somebody is one of my one of the more significant relationships in my life. And a friend and I we drove to Pittsburgh to see Lou Reed at the Syrian Mosque. And I came home that night and she broke up with me that night. I don't think it was because of Lou Reed.
No, she's planning on it.
That's kind of
mean.
And I can remember that very specifically. I can still listen to that Lou Reed album. I can still remember the concert. Like that breaking up with her did not change the context of
probably because I assume you were a fan of Lou Reed before then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right,
yeah. So it wasn't
it was a relatively new thing at that point in my life, but yes. And also, I guess maybe to finish that story, this is someone who I've known literally my entire life, and we are still friends. We got through that entire relationship thing relatively unscathed emotionally. But at the time, it was traumatic. It was losing a relationship and all that stuff. But,
Katya, I think that you can like recontextualize like your memories of things and just like we talked about before, when you think about something, whatever you're thinking about at that time, you can associate with a prior memory and form like and reconstruct the memory. So if you think about, this was my first kiss and I really enjoyed that kiss and this is what I liked about it, then you associate that with the song, then you're sort of forming like a new memory and you can kind of disassociate like the fact that, you broke up with this guy later on.
I wonder if anybody, I mean, you said, you talked about reliving all of your, every time you think back, you're just sort of recreating it. How good could your first kiss have really been?
Perfect. It was great. Perfect.
I actually don't remember mine almost at all.
Yeah.
I think my brain is trying to protect me from something. Yeah. About like how not good it was.
Yeah, I'm kind of there too.
Well, people say, I remember my first kiss. Just things people say. You never forget your first love or the first kiss or the first time you had sex or the first. And I'm like, true. Really? Do you? I mean, like, I vaguely know who those people are, but do I remember all that?
Just like people who have had like perfect childhoods and they don't remember bad things that have happened.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like
it's again changing your memories.
Well, yeah, what I'm wondering is if you decided that like the loss of your virginity or your first kiss or whatever is an important moment. So every time you remember it fondly. It just becomes a nicer and nicer memory over 20 years, even though really it was probably two 14-year-olds who barely knew how lips work.
And Mav, I mean, like in general, that's like true in general, how people look fondly back. Oh, in the good old days, like kids were so great and respected their elders and all this stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, and I mean, we've been going long, but I think that's a really good point. I mean, that's probably very important. Like we've talked about that before. Of like the Make America Great Again of it all is trying to return to not only the ideal of an America that was better for, the rich white man that says it, but which, might have been great for you because, the world was pretty awesome for you when it sucked for a lot of other people. Sure. But I also think we often talk about it's the entire Trump plan was to return to the greatness of a world that never really existed. Biden does the same thing now. I mean, I always promised on this show that, if we could get Trump out of office, I would complain about Biden, too. Biden is always talking about, I want to return to a world of civility in politics. What the fuck world are you talking about? Biden got into politics in the 1970s. Watergate was going on. Right. What the fuck are you talking about? That world that he believes in never existed. Now, which is not to say that there was never a time where bipartisanship happened. Of course it did. But he remembers it through rose-colored glasses because he constantly says it over and over again for 40 years to where like it's just the way he remembers it. And he doesn't focus on the fact that Watergate happened. He misses that because it doesn't, it doesn't matter.
Watergate and Vietnam War was happening.
Yeah, right. There's like the Chicago 7, there's all these horrible things.
The Ron hostage crisis.
Right. And he writes out like there was never, and I'm not even trying to say like literally in this conversation, I'm not trying to, as much as I hate Trump, I'm not even trying to say that something is wrong with either Biden or Trump individually in that way. Just that's how people think, right? Like things were so great when I was a kid. No, you were a kid. You didn't notice all the bad stuff. And then like you've not dwelled on it for 60 years.
Especially because in Biden's case, there's also like, it's not necessarily just like positive and negative associations. It's like, is that memory useful for Biden? Like for the kind of career he wants to have and all that stuff, contemplating Watergate probably isn't all that useful for him. Which isn't to say he's like forgotten that Watergate ever happens, but it's not like when he thinks of when he thinks of that moment in time, like that's probably not the first thing that pops into his head.
And he's trying to build a counter narrative to the one we've been living,
right?
And change the conversation.
But I do think that there's some, because it's not just him. I mean, they're the two famous people, right? I'm mentioning Biden and Trump because they're the presidents, right? But I hear people literally say that all the time. Like, back in my day, Steph, your mom said
comics were better in my day.
Yeah, back in my day, there were no political, unless you read comics before 1938, then yes, there were, and not even then. But like superhero comics were always political. Literally, Captain America's first appearance, he punches Hitler in the face. We weren't even in the war yet. They almost caused an international incident. My dissertation has parts of actual Nazis in Hitler's camp being very, very upset with Kirby and for Kirby and Simon for that event, right? Like it was a big deal. They wrote letters about Siegel and Schuster and like how can we kill these two kids in Cleveland? Like the Nazis were really concerned with how Superman was, because it really was that way, right? So, but we remember a simpler time. There's a book called The Way We Never Were. It's a great book about I don't remember who wrote it. I'll link in the show notes about things like why people remember stuff like kids didn't have premarital sex back in my day. There were not a lot of gay people running around. There were none of those things are true. Unless you are, I don't know all of history. So I'm going to say, and Hannah is not here to go to the previous century. So, but I can verify that unless you were over 130 years old right now, and probably if Hannah were here, she'd say, nope, you have to be over like 400 years. I can verify that there was premarital sex and gay people as far back as
if you're using that age, Mav, let me ask my dad.
Yeah.
This is actually one of the things about studying like Puritan history and early American like religious society lots of teen pregnancies.
Yeah.
They don't talk about
That's why they got
Lots
married so early.
It's not even that's why they got married so early, but like children out of wedlock that did not result in marriages was actually not uncommon. There's some evidence to suggest actually there may have been more teen pregnancies in the 1600s, and not like teen pregnancies in the sense of like got married really young, but out of marriage teen pregnancies. Like there may have been more in like the 1600s than there are now, which like flips like I think a lot of people's assumptions about like the 1600s because we have this idea of like Puritans are very like, you know, I mean, first of all, not everyone in early colonies was a Puritan, even though I think we are kind of taught that in many ways in at least American schools. But yeah, we have this idea that like, oh, they're very prim and proper and no dancing and they're very pious and things, and it's like, well, sure, yeah, some of them, but like
in theory,
but also a lot of other stuff going on. Also, humans gonna human. We haven't changed all that freakishly much. Like we haven't like somehow morphed into another species.
Right.
But we remember this because our cultural memory works the same way as human memory, right? Like we have chosen to remember the good stuff throughout history by just repeating it over and over again until we can convince ourselves it's true. And I guess from what I understand from talking to Stephanie, that's how memory works on a personal level, right? Like like memory is an act of self-delusion.
Oh yeah. Yeah. In many cases, sure. Why not? Why not be the happiest you can be?
So I don't remember. Have we resolved anything?
I don't remember either. Do I even remember the beginning of this episode?
Good conversation.
I've learned a lot. I mean, and I hope the listeners have too. I think that the way the brain works is fascinating. There should maybe be people who study it for a living or something. I don't know.
Matt did forget some stuff.
Awkward.
Stephanie, thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for remembering and acknowledging.
This is actually useful. I mean, I do hope that people learn some stuff from it.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Siler.
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Master Wayne.
I guess, and this goes poorly every single time, because I have to live here and there's no, and we can't escape each other because pandemic. So Stephanie, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Oh, yeah, people. Like,
really? Okay.
I do want to plug. Yeah.
You almost never.
I think people should go to my project website if you have kids who are in the middle school age range who are interested in science and who want to sort of maybe do some kind of science fair type projects. We have tools available for that. And those that website is available at isptutor.org. I don't think you need a www or anything like that. But anyway, that has like stuff for kids, actually like kids, not just middle school, but young kids who might want to. We did this with my niece and nephew. We gave them this little comic book thing illustrating the difference between scientists and engineers, and they seemed to like it, and they went off and ran their own experiments. So it seemed to be like motivating to them.
That'll be linked in the show notes, so you can. So you're saying it's a place that you can learn and then hopefully remember what you've learned.
I think so. Yes. In fact, for the instruction on experimental design, if we're speaking about memory, then we have found like lots and lots of evidence that people remembered what they learned, even years later. Like if you really learn something and you understand, and it's like you have like a nice coherent conceptual understanding of things, then you're more likely to remember them years to come.
Here's where I'm going to put, like in the YouTube version of the show, I'm going to put the more you know rainbow just going by. Okay. Katya, what about you?
You can find on the internet at Just That Nerd. On also probably other places. I have no idea what accounts I haven't. I've lost track with them, but they're usually all under Just That Nerd Kid because I made them in college and just never made them sound more reasonable.
I wonder how likely you are to post on ones that you don't remember that you have.
I mean, I might black out occasionally, and and have like fever dreams where I just go on social media and post on these accounts. I don't know.
Well, I learned from this show that like if you're drunk when you do something, if you want to recall it, you'd be drunk again, right? So, or high or whatever. So yeah. So if you're suddenly posting to LiveJournal, we'll know. Or MySpace.
Pretty sure I never had a LiveJournal. I did have a MySpace, although I think that's been scrubbed from the internet, thankfully.
I think MySpace is still out there. It's to an email account I haven't had in like 15 years, so I can't access it to do anything with it. And I don't remember the password at all. So.
I don't. I mean, MySpace still exists.
Yeah, it does. It does exist. I'm on it right now.
Exists, and some people.
Yeah, but I don't know that that the accounts that you had like I don't think the database that existed back when it was MySpace, what we used to use, is still there. So
that's good.
Well, let's see if I can try to figure out how to get into my account.
But anyway,
anything else you want to plug?
No, you can find me at Vox Popcast, home of the 5-star review.
Oh wow! See, that's what we really need. That would be the if you want us to remember you write us a 5-star review. But that's the perfect. We don't have to worry about all the eugenics bad, even though they are right. You don't even need a clever review. Just write 5 stars. Vox Popcast, home of the 5-star review. Yeah, someone write that. We'll mention your name on the show. I want to be able to announce we've finally got a review that says home of the 5-star review. So if you write that review, we will announce you on the show because I really want to be able to do that
and remember you forever.
Remember you forever. Yes.
More positively as time goes by.
Mav will go seek out his own tiny bear and make a small shrine to you.
Let's see. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, all of the places, always at Chris Maverick. You can follow the show, all those same places, at Vox Popcast. And you can follow the show's blog at www.voxpopcast.com, where we talk about whatever we're going to be talking about next time, which, again, I don't actually remember what next time is because we're recording the shows out of order.
Because it might not be next time. It could be last time. I
mean, I know right now you could tell us about what your thoughts are on the Falcon and Winter Soldier series, but I'm pretty sure that episode aired last week. I think. I don't remember. It hasn't happened yet. So anyway, but you can follow the show's blog at www.voxpopcast.com. And as Wayne said, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify, or wherever the hell else you get podcasts from, but especially at iTunes, Apple Music. That helps other people find the show. Subscribe to us also on our YouTube feed. We are getting close to our first goal of 100 subscribers, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually a very big milestone. And once we hit 100, then the next milestone's like 1,000. So I really, really want to hit 100 subscribers. So please subscribe to us on YouTube, like and subscribe, hit the bell, whatever the YouTube things are. I will be eternally grateful and see images with the show. You can also follow my other podcast there, which is Gosh Golly Wow, where it's all about the comic book Excalibur, and there's images there as well. They're both available, 2 shows for the price of one, which is free anyway, I guess. The internet's weird. I would like to thank Maximilian of Thoughtform Music for our epic theme song, building ever so more epically and playing us out. I'd like to thank Stephanie for joining us one more time.
Thanks,
I'd like to thank you at home. I'd like to thank you at home for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.